Okay, watch this move. It's 1933 and the American dream is about to be born.
Gives at least some protection to 50 millions of our citizens.
Before that, the current system has to break. People will panic, and the fix they reach for works, like immediately. But it also sets off a chain reaction that lands on us 100 years later. It's a pivotal move, and yeah, this one decision is why so many people are poorer than their parents, why 77% of people believe home ownership is more difficult than it used to be, and why the American dream doesn't just feel broken, it feels impossible. I want to show you the moment the American dream was born, the moment it started to slip away, and whether it still exists at all.
Like so many people these days, we live in the suburbs.
Be regarded as historic for all time.
At last, the Bryants have all the space they need.
But that's all changed now.
Let's back up slightly before the panic. It's the 1920s in the US, and the economy runs almost entirely on local banks.
The bank offers us many services.
Around 30,000 of them. But they aren't huge like today. They're small. There's no insurance on deposits, so if your bank fails, your money is gone. And banks failed a lot.
We've got to stick together, though. We've got to have faith in each other.
But hey, people are buying homes, businesses are expanding, and stocks keep climbing. Regular families, well, they're about to put their savings into the market for the first time. Until
On the 24th of October, 1929, America's illusions exploded in her face.
prices start to flip, lenders pull back, businesses can't get cash to keep things running.
Don't look now, but there's something funny going on over there at the bank, George.
At this point, the first thing you and I would probably do is grab our money, right? But you can't. Because banks don't have everyone's money sitting in the vault. They keep a tiny fraction and lend the rest out to businesses and people.
You're thinking of this place all wrong, as if I had the money back in a safe. The money's not here. Well, your money's in Joe's house. That's right next to yours. And in the Kennedy house, and Mrs. Maitland's house, and 100 others.
This means if you wait too long, you lose everything. So everyone else rushes to get their money all at once. But the money is already gone. Entire towns lose their savings. People who did nothing wrong are wiped out overnight. The market crashes. Enter the Great Depression.
Remember that this thing isn't as black as it appeared.
This one moment is about to define how we built and lost the American dream. I'll show you what I mean. Fast forward, it's now 1933, 4 years after the Great Depression started. Everything is breaking. 9,000 banks vanish, billions in savings wiped out. So the goal quietly shifts. How are we going to make sure that one bad moment, this moment, doesn't wipe out an entire generation? So they move fast, and they do a lot of things at once. The government rewires the financial system. Deposits are insured now. Credit is backstopped. The downside is capped, and emergency lending programs are created. The goal isn't growth yet, it's survival, which teaches everyone one thing. When private money freezes, the government steps in to keep the system moving. That promise works, panic fades, confidence returns. But this patch, it creates a different problem. Basically, when pressure builds, the government will absorb it, spread it out, and push it into the future. That playbook works, so they keep it. But over time, we get some side effects. Groceries now cost more, rent starts to creep up, and savings feels a lot harder than it should be because money starts to erode. That's the trade-off. So people don't run to get ahead, they run to stay in place. That's the treadmill. But wait a minute, there's a glimmer of hope that's about to happen. The system doesn't just survive, it starts to grow. Factories scale, jobs spread, wages rise, homes get built, and families move up. Not by luck, but because the dominoes finally line up. This is the moment that's sold to us, the life we strive for, the moment the American dream takes shape. Once the collapse was off the table, the system only had one way to stay legitimate, so they take it. But it causes the American dream to have an expiration date. Let's fast forward to 1945 and around the 50s as well. I want to see how this plan we made plays out.
It was all over. And when President Truman's announcement came at 7 o'clock, the lid really blew off.
Okay, Things seem to be paying off. The war ended, and we're expanding a lot.
New highway construction is rapidly changing the face of the nation.
Highways slash across the country, suburbs sprout out of farmland, and credit cards land in wallets for the first time.
This is the sweep of the future.
All right, people are feeling good about life. They're buying homes.
The home they've always dreamed of. The happiest investment they've ever made.
Because the system has a floor now. Must be nice. Progress doesn't feel fragile anymore. More risk can be taken, big loans don't feel reckless, and people grow up expecting progress. It was the golden age of capitalism.
Looks like somebody's been doing some shopping, and that means somebody's been doing a lot of walking. By the time a woman assembles...
No, I don't want to get canceled. You can't say that today. Let's just roll the capitalism montage.
It's out of this world. Take a look at the new Ford.
And Dave needs the car every day for business.
He takes pride in keeping the car clean and shining. Time out, pause, and refresh.
People are spending and prices are, wait a minute, slowly climbing. Hold on. Life feels good, but the math is starting to shift. This is the start of inflation becoming normal. It's going to trickle down to us and eventually make us argue over egg prices and create a housing crisis at the same time. Why did the solution create another problem? Let's compare something really quick. Okay. Oh, yeah. I see it. Here, let me show you. Remember that 1933 moment when the rules changed? Well, before that, if spending stopped, the system would break. Hard, painful, and then reset. It was allowed to collapse. It cleansed everything. Deflation was sometimes normal. After 1933, though, the system works differently. When things slowed down, it wasn't allowed to break. It isn't allowed to reset. If things go bad, the central banks step in. The central banks now can lower rates and keep them low. Money gets easier to access. Assets increase. It's basically to stop everything from freezing because now this system is full of promises. Remember all the new programs they created? All of them assume one thing, that people will keep earning income. So when demand weakens, the response isn't to let the prices fall and clear the excess. The response is to keep the money flowing. Keep borrowing, keep buying, keep businesses alive long enough to get through the slowdown. The side effect? Inflation. So now, this plan helps the system recover. Later, it spirals. But we'll get to that. Just remember this very moment. Growth becomes the band-aid. My spending becomes someone else's paycheck. So if someone stops spending, the income disappears. And all those promises start breaking at once. So what does that mean for the American dream? How do we continue it? What do you do if money weakens, but the collapse isn't allowed? You force the economy to grow. You don't argue about inflation. You expand, you build faster, you produce more. You pull more people into the workforce. It looks like prosperity. The GI Bill sends millions to college. Factories scale. Labor participation explodes. Suburbs stretch farther and farther out. Everything gets bigger, faster, cheaper, because growth works. And for decades, it's brilliant. Wages rise. Living standards climb. Productivity masks the pressure. It's the American dream. We made it. But you see the problem, right? Growth isn't removing pressure. It's outrunning it. And as long as production keeps pace, as long as new houses, new roads, new jobs keep appearing, the trade-off stays hidden. For a while, growth is enough. But underneath all that optimism, the engine quietly changes. Here, take a look at this chart. After World War II, household debt sits at around 30% of household income. Through the 1950s and 60s, as mortgages scale and consumption expands, the number rises into the 40 to 45% range. By the early 1980s, it climbs roughly to 50 to 55%. This means the average household now owes about half a year's income. Borrowing and spending becomes structural, a way to keep demand moving when real growth slows. And prices start to rise, not all at once, they drift. Slow enough to ignore, fast enough that doing nothing feels expensive. And eventually, we hit another wall. You can't force infinite growth out of physical expansion anymore. But the system still needs motion to keep itself from collapsing. It always has to keep growing. Then they realize, if growth can't come from building more, where does it come from now? So now we're in the 70s and something starts to feel off. You're still working, life is still moving forward, but the math doesn't feel the same. For decades, paychecks rose with productivity. You produce more, you earn more.
To take their places as worthy members of adult society.
But the American dream? It's about to weaken. This one moment will explain why barely anyone is able to afford a house today. Let's answer the second question. Why did the American dream start slipping away? At this point, wages are slowing. So why are homes still getting more expensive? What's actually happening?
After all, if you're going to entertain, you'll want your home to look its best.
Well, remember how we mentioned that inflation became the norm? Well, inflation now changes when people buy. This part is key. So if prices are rising because the value of money is eroding, waiting basically costs you more money in the long run. People will start pulling purchases forward. They'll buy now instead of later, fueling inflation. And credit steps in to make this possible. This doesn't raise wages, but it does raise prices. Now at this point, assets rise even when paychecks don't. The system isn't rewarding work anymore. It's rewarding being locked in early. That's the quiet shift. The American dream doesn't vanish here. It's slipping. Are you starting to see what's happening to the American dream? It's becoming something more risky. For the first time, earning money and keeping up aren't the same thing anymore. The wage gap widens around here. It's still manageable, but by the late 1970s, inflation is out of control from all the spending. So we need to do something about it. The side effects are outweighing the upside. Okay, watch this fix because it'll change how the American dream can be achieved forever. Everyone at this point feels it. Businesses, workers, policymakers, the prices are drifting higher and higher. So in 1979, something drastic has to happen.
That's a condition you can change.
Paul Volcker steps in. His goal? Stop inflation at any cost.
And sky-high interest rates, he figured, would have the desired effect.
It triggers a recession. Unemployment spikes, borrowing freezes, assets take a hit, housing stalls, and stocks move nowhere. This part hurts, but it creates another side effect. By the early 1980s, prices finally calm down. Inflation breaks. The new system stabilizes. But now, here's the lesson. Cash is no longer safe. Working hard isn't protection. Ownership is. So, by the end of this era, the rules are clear. If you want stability in a system that keeps moving, you don't just earn, you have to. But there's another problem. If assets keep rising faster than your income, then how do we get in to participate? Now we have to skip forward in time to see the trade-off.
When businesses all over the country operate at a steady profit, our economic health is tough.
Okay, it's the mid-1980s, and the way we achieve the American dream changes again. Ownership works, that part is clear now. Homes rise, stocks rise, assets protect you while inflation rises. But then there's another feeling that creeps in. Getting in is a lot harder than it used to be. Homes cost more relative to income. Down payments feel bigger. The people who already own something, they're fine. Their prices are locked in, their gains compounding.
He takes great pride in owning a fine, new, long-term mortgaged home that was built to last a lifetime.
But if you're on the outside looking in, the gap keeps widening. It's starting to sound like today now, isn't it? So the question shifts again. How am I supposed to get in now? That's the pressure, and there aren't many doors left. So people reach for the only thing that still bridges the gap: debt. Do you see the pattern? What's happening to risk? Watch what happens when rates fall. By the early 1980s, inflation collapses back to 3 or 4%. They did it. They solved it. The dollar stabilizes, trust comes back, but once inflation is broken, something else quietly changes. Rates don't come down just once. They keep coming down. for decades. And when rates fall, borrowing gets easier. People stop asking how much does this cost and start asking, can I afford the monthly payments? Assets rise even more. Debt gets reframed as a tool. This is the only way into the American dream. Mortgage debt climbs from about 30% in the 1980s to nearly 70% by 2007. Household debt follows the same path because credit stepped in where wages stopped growing. So the system finds a new way to move forward. Lower rates, more borrowing, more leverage. Volcker broke inflation, but the cure created a system that could only grow with credit. The American dream worked for the people born at the right time when interest rates were dropping. But there was a trade-off. Households have to take on more risk. Companies borrow to buy back stocks, and governments roll debt forward instead of paying it down. Everyone realizes debt doesn't just amplify the gains, it multiplies the risk. Now prices can't afford to fall because too many promises sit on top of them. Mortgages, pensions, corporate balance sheets, entire retirement plans. A slowdown used to be healthy and clear the excess. Now it threatens everything at once. So the system adapts again, which means every dip has to be rescued, every shock has to be softened, every risk needs to be absorbed. That's why today the Fed always is on standby, ready to backstop anything that looks like it might start cascading. And slowly, the system stops asking whether something is productive. It only has one question to ask. Will this bubble stay up? But this next move, this is where the American dream is. And this is why everything is so expensive. Okay, let's answer that last question. Where is the American dream? By now, the system runs on debt. Ownership is mandatory. Credit keeps things moving. Now watch where the American dream gets pushed to, where the system forces us to be. So here's what really changes. Capital doesn't just move differently, life does. Homes stop being a place to live in. They start being a hedge against inflation on the balance sheets. Stocks stop being optional. They become retirement infrastructure. Owning something isn't upside anymore. It's protection. Because everyone has been drafted into the same game. Keep the system alive and outrun inflation. So finally, after watching all the dominoes fall, where is the American dream? The real answer? The American dream didn't just disappear. It moved from stability through work to stability through ownership, and eventually stability through risk. Everything now has to be priced as if the system will keep working. That's not just a bubble, that's the everything bubble. A century in the making. The American dream didn't disappear. It happened for a brief window from 1945 to about the mid-70s. The math lined up for those lucky enough to be born in that generation. Wages rose with productivity, homes tracked income. Growth came from building, not borrowing. And once that version of the dream ended, the system didn't stop. It must always keep growing. So the American dream didn't die. It lives in a more dangerous part of town. So the dream is still there, just not where it used to be. But now leverage isn't an option anymore. It's the entry fee. And now there's a new promise being offered to continue that growth. And this is where AI enters the story as a necessity, because once the system runs on assets, leverage, and institutional promises, it still has one unsolved problem: productivity. Wages haven't kept up for decades, growth has leaned on credit, assets have been pulled forward from the future. That only works for so long. So when something comes along and promises to do more with less, the system needs it to continue the American dream. Whether it delivers it or not, that's the real question. And that's the final domino. Now that leads us down to another rabbit hole. The AI transition will be very painful. This left video is where we travel through the history of other tech revolutions and compare it to the AI revolution of today and how it will pan out for workers. But if you want to learn about the current bubble and where the risk really is, it'll be on the video on the right. Oh man, there's still so many dominoes to explore, so many systems to connect. But for now, thanks for subscribing and staying to the end. I'll see you in the next domino. Peace.